And here we are with another episode of All Things Conflict with me, your host, Maria Arpa. And today I'm very glad to introduce Ruth Allington. Now, I've known Ruth for a good 10 years, and she's a former president of the Geological Society. Now, Ruth has been an expert in working alongside the public as a mediator when the developers come along, or when things need to be built or towns need to be dug up. And Ruth's going to talk to us about the skills that she's used and the conflicts that she's faced and dealt with in her long career as a geologist. So let's get into conversation. Hi Ruth, how amazing that you've made it here. This is fantastic. I'm so happy that we're going to have a conversation in front of people. Because we've been friends for how long now?
Since about 2015, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, maybe, can you remember, maybe you could say something about how we met? And
Well, I first met you, I came up to you after a CMC conference speech that you made, a Civil Mediation Council conference speech that you made. Or maybe I just thought, oh, I need more of this. And Googled you. I can't remember. Anyway, I signed on for a mediation. No, it was dialogue roadmap. I think it was a week in somewhere in North London. Near the canal.
Yeah.
And then I did a follow-up week in mediation with David, I think in 2016. And then for a while, I used to go every now and again and work with some actors and David to get some experience. And then I got busy with work. But when I left full-time consultancy in 2019, we were in touch again properly. And I asked you about the year-long training.
Yeah.
So,
What a year. Amazing, wasn't it? It was a
really
fabulous time. And we did a second year, didn't we, together?
Yes.
Yeah.
DRM deepening. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. And then you ran the mediation consultancy for a bit, didn't you?
For about 18 months, yeah.
Yeah, which was fabulous. So we sort of know each other quite well, don't we?
We do.
I'd say.
We do. And it's, of course, a great pleasure to be here. And it's been amazing getting to know you and being involved with Peaceful Solutions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And actually, your real career, if you like, is you're a geologist.
I am.
And I mean, you were even president of the Geological Society for your sins, or maybe fantastically, I don't know. But so I'd love you to just talk about your consultancy as a geologist and the work you've done and how that brought you into contact with the kinds of conflicts that you then, went and searched the skills to be able to manage. I think, does that make sense? Yeah. Thank you.
So, should I just say a little bit about how I got into it in the first place? I was very keen on physical geography and being outdoors at school. So I was in the Duke of Edinburgh's award programme with a bunch of friends, and I just loved physical geography, and then had an opportunity to do an O-level in geology in the sixth form. There was no A-level offered at my school, which was amazing. And I was thinking about what can I do with physical geography. Well, the careers service was completely hopeless. And I could think of meteorology or cartography, but nothing was really floating my boat. Then we were taken on a trip to Portsmouth Polytechnic, it's now the University of Portsmouth, to see the engineering geological laboratories there. I was at school in Chichester. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And I sort of squirreled it away. And then I was thinking about my university choices. and I thought, well, I don't think I've got enough geology to do a whole degree in geology. So I applied for joint honours programmes, and I went to King's College London doing joint honours geology, geography. I had a choice between King's and Exeter, I remember. Exeter I thought I would choose because it's really close to the coast and it's close to Dartmoor and those sorts of places. But I chose King's because I wanted to be in the chapel choir, and I was in the chapel choir, so job done. In my second year, I think, I had the opportunity to do an independent study in geography. And my tutor, a man called Dennis Brunsden, wonderful geomorphologist, put me in touch with a man called Geoffrey Walton. And I phoned him up, had to find a phone box in those days.
Oh, yes.
Went into my phone box. Hello, my name's Ruth Allington. Oh, yes, I know all about you, he said, and invited me down the following week. It was summer, to go and visit my fieldwork site, which was actually at Aberfan in South Wales. And there is nobody in Aberfan my age, because all those kids were killed in the disaster on the 10th of October 1966. So that was quite a place to be doing my summer field work. And then Geoffrey Walton offered me a job, and I was in his consultancy later, a partner in the consultancy for 38 years until I left in 2019. So I was in the same company for a very long time. And initially, I was obviously very young then, and I was supervising a lot of drilling, doing some analysis, and really, really loving it. I was also Jeff's bagwoman, really. I used to go everywhere with him. I was in his role as assistant. So I got to see people having meetings, and I learned a lot about what's effective and also a lot about what's not effective in meetings. Quite early on, I got amazing opportunities put in my way to be an expert witness in planning inquiries, and later in connection with litigation. And then I really started noticing how people behave when they're under stress and where there are disputed circumstances. So with litigation, it would be mostly contractual disputes. In planning inquiries, you've got a real heated, often very, very heated and emotional response from local communities, and quite a technical response from the people who would be our clients. By 1994, British coal had been privatised. We did a lot of work for open-cast coal contractors, and also a little bit for British coal. But British coal was privatised, and then all of the open-cast contracting was private. And the disputes that would otherwise have been settled, because it was in everybody's interest to maintain this tender list of specialist contractors with enough capital to start a mine and see it through, the gloves were off then. They went the distance. And my introduction to mediation was through being an expert witness for one of these, which had got very stuck. I'd been associated with it for about 5 years, I'd say. They went to mediation. It settled in a day. I thought, oh, now that's interesting. Because I didn't actually think the mediator himself was great. But I did think the process was very interesting, and particularly what went on in the room with everybody on the side I was instructed by. Everybody was in the room. The CEO was in the room. The surveyor, who'd originally been alleged to have made a mistake, was in the room, and everybody in between, me included. And half the time, the mediator wasn't with us. So people started to tell the truth in the presence of the CEO. And I thought, now this is very interesting. So I got myself trained as a mediator with the Academy of Experts. I'd been a member of the Academy for a long, long time. And cut my teeth on county court mediations, usually in the basement. There was a scheme then. It was usually in the basement, and you had 2 hours to mediate between two parties who'd been sent downstairs from the small claims court. And if you didn't complete the mediation in 2 hours, you got locked in. So there was a bit of jeopardy there. And I really enjoyed that, because you could make a huge difference to somebody's life in 2 hours. Or not, but usually they settled. And meanwhile, I was continuing my work. But I would say that was a huge turning point, because acquiring mediation skills, even though on the more evaluative end, compared with the dialogue roadmap, was easily the most useful professional skill that I ever learned.
Well, that's really amazing. Yeah. I love that, hearing that you got this opportunity to sit in a mediation, and you suddenly went, wow, like this is an amazing process. I remember a very good friend of mine saying that, because this is called alternative dispute resolution, it comes under that heading. And I remember a very good friend of mine, who's a very senior lawyer, saying that when the legal profession first heard about ADR, they called it awful drop in revenue, because they were really worried about how this process could bring people to some kind of resolution without all of the kind of adversarial fighting and the taking sides and drawing battle lines. So it's lovely to hear that story of you realising, and of course this happens to a lot of people. They suddenly stumble across it for one reason or another, and then realise that actually there could be another way. Yeah. So then, as I understand it, you're working in a consultancy, and I'm guessing a lot of the work, as you described, was sort of between authorities and businesses. But then, as I understand it, you then started encountering the general public through that work, and I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So I stood up in a meeting around about 2017. So this was after I'd learnt about the dialogue roadmap. And my mediation practice was starting to shift then. I was getting braver about having the parties in one room most of the time, instead of the sort of classical model that I was taught originally of the mediator bringing the parties together for an initial meeting and then shuttling backwards and forwards. And I was at that time president of the European Federation of Geologists, and we were involved in a Horizon 2020 project called, I can't remember what it was called. It's not relevant really. But there was a meeting in Bristol, I think. Anyway, the West Country, and it was about the planning system, about mineral planning, and how it can be more integrated with general spatial planning. And I stood up in one discussion and said my piece about the power of listening and mediation. I was approached by a mineral planner from Devon who was interested in what I had to say, particularly in the context of some problems, big problems of complete breakdown in public trust between a mine operator and the public who lived close by. And I was appointed as a community mediator to help facilitate discussions and help to try and facilitate resolution of some of these problems. That I think that was at around about the same time that I'd also found myself as a coordinator for a team of independent engineering experts on Dublin Metro North, so a planned northern extension to, well, not an extension, a new metro in the north of Dublin. And I thought I would just be deploying my experts to help to inform the public and explain the environmental impact statement and the reference design. That was really my role. I've got some fantastic experts in tunnelling and noise and vibration and all of those sorts of things. So I went to the kick-off meeting in Dublin. Was very impressed that they'd got the public involved in selecting the team, because I did ask, why did you choose us? Because I knew we were up against some of these big multinational consultancies, and we were just, us, really. And it was quite clear that the public really liked my mediation credentials. So they were really interested in that. It was also very soon clear to me that I couldn't just deploy my experts. I needed to talk to everybody first. So I set out my rules. I said, I'd like to meet everybody, engineers included. And these are the rules. When we get into a room, everything's confidential. You can say what you like. I won't pass it on unless you ask me to or give me permission to. So then everybody is really terrified and thinking, oh, what have we done? The authority that was promoting the metro, public authority, thought, oh, no, we've appointed this woman. She's going to make them better objectors. We're in trouble. The public were very suspicious. She's being paid by the public authority. Mm-hmm. How can she be independent? Mm-hmm. So I was actually rather thrilled by all of that, because I basically just said to them, well, try me. Let's figure it out. And I knew that the job was done when they started talking to each other, because they'd got the equipment, as it were. They'd got the insight into each other's positions, and enough for the public, enough technical information expressed to them in human language, and for the engineers, enough build-up of empathy, actually, to really understand what it was that the public were wanting and needing. And I was standing in a room where we'd had a finish off meeting, and I saw the chief engineer arguing with a woman from a residence group, and I thought, oh dear, what now? So I sort of sidled over, and they were arguing about who should take the credit for deciding to appoint us. So I was absolutely thrilled that that's all they had to argue about, who would take the credit.
Wow. So
that whetted my appetite then.
Yeah. So you got some confidence, and
yeah,
I loved hearing you say, that there was this kind of lack of trust, like, well, you're being paid by the authority, so how could you possibly be impartial? And the authority saying, well, we're just going to create a load more protesters. We're just giving them a forum. And I think I heard you say something like, and I was really excited by that, or really engaged by that.
Yes. I just saw it as I think if both parties are a bit unhappy at the start, then you're clearly not in either pocket.
Yeah.
And it gave me something to work with.
So what's the skill in you, or that you've learned, that helped you not to go, oh, no, I can't do, what's the difference between, because, most of us are trained to be conflict avoidant, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm naturally conflict avoidant, very conflict avoidant. But so my big learning, particularly from working with you and David and all my peers that I've worked with, is daring to listen It's daring to listen for longer than is actually naturally comfortable for me to listen. And then somebody told me, I can't remember who, maybe it was you, that there's a social transaction that goes on. If I give you something, you want to give me something. And if I give you my attention, when you've finished whatever you want to say, you want to give me something. So what's the thing you can give me in that moment? You can give me your attention. So I just learnt to slow down. And that unlocked a lot of things for me. I always used to, well, I'm still not keen on it, but I always used to hate networking events. Just full of, men in suits, eating, drinking, people more beautifully dressed than me, and would anybody speak to me? And just awful. And something unlocked once I got into that way of thinking, where I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is I won't have any interesting conversations today.
Amazing. I love that. So then you've got this sort of, sometimes I'm guessing fairly angry public. What do you do? Like, because you've given us that example of the Metro in Dublin. But what do you do when you're confronted with, angry and intractable people?
I think, well, the first thing is to listen with empathy. In the moment, you just know, and you've said so many times to all of us, you can't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
As just follow the steps, listen and feedback, or listen and repeat in a particular way, so that it's really clear you are listening, but not necessarily agreeing.
Yeah, because when people are angry and shouting, well, there are two things, aren't there? The first is, if somebody is angry and shouting or giving it large or, whatever, however it's manifesting, the very first need is to be heard.
Yes.
And, I think we skip over that. We're either trying to fix it or trying to repel it,
Yes.
And the first need is to be heard. And that, because if somebody's in that kind of a state, they've already made up a story that they don't matter, or they can't be heard, or no one's ever going to take any notice, or they have to fight tooth and nail to get what they want.
Yes. I remember with the Metro, there were some people who were definitely in that kind of state. Not everybody. Some people were just so relieved that there was somebody, with a badge on their head saying, I'm here to listen to you. Oh, this is amazing. But some people were in exactly that state you describe. And then it did feel like a personal attack. Well, what can you do? I've already told them. So I used to say, well, you tell me, and let's see where we go from there. Because I'm not part of them. You tell me. Often residents would tell me something. I try to get to, what do you want? What do you need to be comfortable with this? And it often wasn't very much. It would,
Yes.
They've told me my railings have to be like this, and I want them like that. I want them this colour, that colour. That's a fairly trivial example. It wasn't always as simple as that. But with working with the experts I had at my disposal, who would also talk to them and translate their technical knowledge and expertise into accessible language, then we could have a conversation about, what's actually possible. Are you asking for the impossible? When I could see that they were asking for something entirely possible, I would ask their permission explicitly to take it to the engineers. So I'd go to the engineer. I said, Mrs. Jones is very worried about the design of the railings that you're going to put, or the proximity to her house, or whatever it is. And is there anything that can be done? And she's had this idea, oh, well, we've already told her. I said, well, you tell me.
Yeah. Yes, because it's not just that you've told someone, it's how you've told them.
Exactly.
Could make a huge
there's
difference.
an awful lot of telling people stuff,
yeah,
particularly from developers. When you find quarry and mine companies, they will work on these projects for years and years, and they're decent people and very very expert, and they've done their best. And so I started to understand how they feel when their best is met with protests and placards and angry people telling them that they don't care, they're unfeeling. They are members of communities, they're family people as well. So it was just try to get each of them more towards a point where they could have a conversation.
That's really interesting, because it's very easy to shout at a job title or a faceless bureaucrat, isn't it? Much easier to have a go at that. I mean, I remember a case I did many years ago. It was a lady who lived in a house that had quite a large front garden. There was no garden, it was just paved over. But she had no fence around it, and she lived next door to a secondary school. And the school started letting the kids, and so she's down the side street and the school's on the high road. But the school made a decision to start letting the kids out from the side entrance onto this residential street. So, of course, they were all congregating in her front because there was no fence. And she'd been in a battle with the school for something like 7 years. And, all sorts of people, local people had been involved, the local elected councillor and this one and that one, and to no avail. And it was only and we only found out about this thing by pure chance, because I was actually doing some work in the school. Found out about this poor lady, and we sat her down with the head teacher, who'd inherited the problem.
Yeah.
He hadn't caused it. And it was really not difficult for them to provide some money towards her building something, and to re-let the young people out onto the high street. Yes, it wasn't that difficult.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the whole session, I mean, obviously you have a lot of preparation, but the whole meeting was 3 hours, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it was quite frightening for her to, leave her front door and find 50, adolescent boys, gathering on her front thing. And she didn't want to spend the rest of her life shouting at them to move, because she felt that would just build up more hostility.
Yeah.
And so, it's that whole thing about, usually when you come down to it, once you've de-escalated and you've cut through all the noise, you can usually get to some things. And sometimes, though, I mean, sometimes there is a job of helping people to move through change, because, if a railway, I mean, I've got HS2, which is about to go right under my house. But these, nobody promised me that, if I own this house for 50 years or whatever, that nothing was going to change in the area. I mean, nobody promised me that. Change happens, urban planning or whatever, I don't know the terms, but all these things happen, and we need to be prepared for those things. But it's all about how we can come together and try to figure something out. Yes.
The predominant feeling is fear.
Right.
And it's fear of something that's entirely unknown.
Right.
And my experience is that then that fear is fueled by research, by talking to other communities, maybe who stopped something. The internet can be a wonderful resource or not in these circumstances. and actually just providing a listening space and reliable information about, what is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Is such an amazing thing to do, even if the public don't get their way. They feel heard, and for most people, that's actually enough, I find.
Yeah, I mean, unless someone's life is going to be totally devastated, and then there are specific routes to handle that, I would guess.
Yes, and developers are not generally allowed to do something that's going to totally devastate people. But then there's a whole other debate about whether people should be displaced, even if they're compensated for that, and so on. But just understanding what the options are and why, what the technical options or practical options are, and why in some cases the option that is preferred by a local community can't be delivered for one reason or another, can be very helpful for a community or for an individual in a community. Sometimes no amount of listening or help will crack it, but I'd say 80% of the time it really will.
Yeah, I agree. And so as I'm listening to you, what I notice is, you're a geologist sort of first and foremost, but there's something about learning these skills and turning to facilitation and mediation and dialogue that's completely changed the direction of how you approach the role. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's absolutely right. I've having started with a joint honours degree where I could choose anything I liked. I could just choose all the course units that I fancied in the whole of London University, except for, I think, Geology 101 and Geography 101. I've come to realise that I'm actually very comfortable sitting in the gaps. So when I developed my skills in quarry design, so actually designing how the quarry is going to, how deep it's going to be, what the angle of the sides is going to be, where it's going to be in relation to the site boundary, where we're going to put the waste rock and so on. That's an exercise in collaboration. So, but in the end, it comes down to the volumes and money. Will it be profitable? Will it be safe? So those are the two sort of technical issues that I need to cover. But can it be profitable, safe, and have the minimum adverse impact on the environment and people? And for that, I need to collaborate with lots and lots of other experts. So I just really like, you call me a jack of all trades if you like. It's probably true. I'm not a world expert on any aspect of geology for sure, but I'm an expert in putting the pieces together, which is what I really enjoy. And mediation has helped me do that more effectively, I think.
Amazing. So it just sort of something just popped up for me when I heard you say about, the resources and the safety and, can we do good things with it? And I'm remembering that you were part of something called Responsible Resources. And I wonder whether I'd love to hear about it. I think it would be useful for people to hear that this is going on.
Yes, there's a fantastic organisation. It's now a charity called Responsible Raw Materials. It's run by Sarah Gordon, Dr. Sarah Gordon. And I first came across Sarah in 2019. For many years, I've been associated with the Pan-European Resources and Reserves Reporting Committee. And there was a discussion in our committee. I'll just go back. So for many years, I've been associated with the Pan-European Resources and Reserves Committee. That's part of an international network of codes and standards set for mining companies and practitioners to operate best practice in reporting, public reporting of mineral reserves, solid mineral reserves and mineral resources, so that the public and particularly investors can trust what is coming out. So if you say there's this much gold, you can see the justification for that, the technical justification, that it's done by competent people. And Sarah had written an article, or there was some sort of post on social media maybe, and there was a discussion about this within the committee, within PERC. And I said, well, perhaps somebody ought to go and speak to her about this and find out what her point of view is. And so off I went, and I met her, and we liked each other straight away. Of course, this is just before the pandemic here. And she'd started responsible, I think it was called Responsible Reserves to begin with, and that might have been what colleagues were a bit doubtful about. So it became Responsible Raw Materials, and she signed me up as an associate, which was very nice of her, because I'd gone freelance by then. And after March the 23rd, 2020, she started having a weekly Zoom call, for everybody associated with Responsible Raw Materials, all the associate consultants and various members of her staff. And from the very first call, it started with, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And this was the sort of professional call that made my heart sing, really. We were actually sharing how we were doing with all this terrible uncertainty, getting to know each other, sharing lots of best practice on risk management and so on. So that was an amazing start to my first year in freelance practice, having left GWP, and it gave me a ready-made community. And then she started in that May of 2020, from, I think, with about 4 weeks, maybe less, lead time. She ran an international conference, mostly online. About 600 people came and contributed. All of those videos about risk management, about community engagement, about all aspects of responsible recovery of raw materials. All of those, they're 10-minute videos. They're all available free of charge on their websites. Absolutely fantastic. So it's an amazing resource, and it's still building.
That's rather remarkable, and great that you're part of that. And nice for people to hear that there are people like you and others who are really thinking about these things.
Oh, there are lots of people in the mining industry thinking about these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, how lovely. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our time together. Now, what are you doing these days?
What am I doing these days? I'm a bit more retired than I was. I'm involved in the prison project with the Centre for Peaceful Solutions, which is amazing. I'm hoping to be more involved in some mediation and facilitation around workplaces in the autumn. I'm singing a lot. I've just built a garden studio, so I'm going to be a printmaker in my garden studio, and sit and read books and entertain friends and go and snip things in my garden. And I've got various trustee and voluntary roles in the geological community still. because I'm not ready not to be busy.
Mhm.
So quite a tapestry of bits and bobs.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And so when you look back on this amazing career, starting at King's College and even before that, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I think I'm most proud of this transformation from just a technical consultant to being more of a facilitator. I'm also incredibly proud of being president of the Geological Society. That was amazing. I absolutely loved it. Yeah, I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of lots of things. Yeah.
Well, it's an amazing
I've had a lovely time.
It's an amazing career. And thank you for coming on to All Things Conflict, and thank you for being my friend, and thank you for being alongside the charity that I run, and and for everything that you do and are in the world.
Well, thank you for everything you've given me.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you.